March 9, 1945, 11:47 p.m. over Tokyo Bay. Lieutenant Nakamura Hiroshi pushed his Nakajima Ki-84 fighter to its maximum climb rate. His radio crackled with urgent orders. 300 American B-29 Superfortress bombers were approaching from the south. Altitude 7,000 feet. Speed 230 miles per hour. Time to intercept, 15 minutes. Hiroshi had flown 42 combat missions against American bombers. He knew the B-29's reputation. Japanese pilots called it the invincible fortress. But tonight, something was different. The Americans were flying low, lower than any previous raid, lower than Japanese fighters could normally reach them. For the first time in months, Hiroshi had a chance to close to firing range. He didn't know that what he was about to discover would explain why Japanese fighter squadrons were losing the air war over Japan. By March 1945, the strategic bombing campaign against Japan had reached a critical turning point. American forces controlled the Mariana Islands, placing Tokyo within range of the B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced bomber in the world. The B-29 was a technological leap beyond anything Japan could match. But its most revolutionary feature wasn't its size or range. It was its defensive armament system. Previous American bombers, the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator, relied on manned gun turrets. Gunners sat exposed in cramped positions, manually aiming and firing 50 caliber machine guns. The system was effective, but limited. The B-29 changed everything. Lieutenant Hiroshi was about to find out how. Hiroshi joined the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force in 1942. By 1945, he was flying the Ki-84 Hayate, one of Japan's most advanced fighters. On paper, it could intercept B-29s at any altitude, but paper specifications didn't account for reality. By March 1945, Japan's air defense system was collapsing. Fuel shortages limited training flights. Experienced pilots were gone. Maintenance crews lacked spare parts. Many Ki-84s couldn't reach their rated performance due to poor quality fuel and worn engines. Hiroshi's squadron started the war with 36 aircraft. By March, only 14 remained operational. Japanese fighter tactics against B-29s had evolved through brutal trial and error. Early attempts at tail attacks proved suicidal. The B-29's tail guns could engage targets at 1,000 yards. Beam attacks from the side were ineffective. The remote turrets tracked too quickly. Head-on attacks offered the best chance but required precise timing and nerves of steel. Hiroshi had attempted 3 head-on attacks in previous missions. Each time, he'd been driven off by defensive fire before reaching effective range. The tracers came from multiple directions simultaneously, but tonight was different. The Americans were flying at 7,000 feet. At that height, Japanese fighters could maintain speed and maneuverability. At 11:58 p.m., Hiroshi spotted the first B-29s, dark silhouettes against the sky, flying in a loose formation that stretched for miles. His orders were clear. Attack from the front. Aim for the cockpit and engines. Hiroshi positioned his Ki-84 3 miles ahead of the formation, climbing to 8,000 feet for a slight altitude advantage. He would dive through the formation, fire a burst, then pull away before the defensive guns could track him. At 1 mile, Hiroshi rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, accelerating to 400 miles per hour. The lead B-29 grew larger in his gun sight. At 800 yards, he pressed the firing button. His 20mm cannons roared. Then something happened that Hiroshi had never experienced. The B-29's defensive fire didn't just come from the front. It came from everywhere at once. Tracers converged on his fighter from the top, bottom, and side simultaneously. The volume of fire was 3 times heavier than anything he'd encountered. Hiroshi broke left, pulling 6 Gs in a desperate evasive maneuver. Tracers followed him through the turn. He heard metallic clangs as 50 caliber rounds struck his aircraft's tail and left wing. He'd been in range for less than 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds the B-29 had fired more rounds at him than an entire formation of B-17s. As Hiroshi pulled away, he realized something was fundamentally different. The guns had tracked him before he opened fire. They'd engaged from multiple positions simultaneously, and they'd followed him through his evasion with impossible accuracy. This wasn't normal defensive fire. This was something else. Hiroshi circled at 10,000 feet, watching other Japanese fighters attempt their attacks. Each time, the result was the same. A brief burst of cannon fire followed by overwhelming defensive fire, forcing the attacker to break away. One Ki-84 from his squadron, flown by Sergeant Tanaka, pressed his attack too close. Hiroshi watched as tracers from 3 different B-29 turrets converged on Tanaka's fighter. The Ki-84 exploded in mid-air. That's when Hiroshi understood. The B-29's guns weren't being aimed by individual gunners. They were being controlled by a central system. When one gunner acquired a target, other turrets automatically tracked the same fighter. The system calculated lead angles and firing solutions faster than any human could. The B-29 wasn't defended by individual gunners. It was defended by a computer network. Japanese intelligence had reported that American bombers used remote turrets, but no one had explained what that meant in practice. Hiroshi now understood. The B-29's gunners sat inside the pressurized fuselage, operating sighting stations that controlled unmanned turrets. They weren't exposed to the elements, and they could control multiple turrets simultaneously. The system gave them 3 critical advantages. First, visibility. Gunners used magnified optical sights, allowing them to engage fighters at 1,000 yards, well beyond the effective range of Japanese cannons. Second, coordination. A fire control officer could direct all turrets to engage priority targets. If a fighter attacked from the front, both forward turrets would track it automatically. There were no gaps in coverage. Third, computational accuracy. Analog computers calculated ballistic trajectories with mathematical precision. Hiroshi realized that Japanese fighter tactics were obsolete. The head-on attack, the beam attack, all assumed defensive fire would come from individual gunners. Against the B-29 Central Fire Control System, these tactics were suicide. At 12:14 a.m., the first B-29s began dropping their payloads. Not high explosive bombs, but M69 incendiary clusters, designed to start fires in Tokyo's wooden buildings. The city below erupted in flames. Hiroshi could see the fires spreading block by block. The Americans weren't targeting military installations. They were targeting the city itself. Hiroshi pushed his Ki-84 into a steep dive, approaching from below and behind, a blind spot for the lower rear turret. He would climb rapidly, fire a burst into the bomber's belly, then dive away. It was a desperate tactic. At 300 yards, he opened fire. His 20mm cannons sent shells into the B-29's fuselage. He saw impacts, flashes of light. Then the B-29's lower rear turret rotated toward him. Hiroshi saw the muzzle flashes. 50 caliber rounds tore through his left wing, shredding the aileron and puncturing the fuel tank. His cockpit filled with the smell of aviation gasoline. He broke right, his engine sputtering. He'd been in range for less than 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds, the B-29's defensive system had crippled his fighter. As he descended toward his airfield, struggling to keep his damaged Ki-84 airborne, Hiroshi understood the terrible truth. Japanese fighters couldn't defeat the B-29. Not with current tactics, not with current technology. The B-29 wasn't just a better bomber. It was a technological leap Japanese aviation couldn't match. Hiroshi managed to land his crippled fighter at 1:47 a.m. Ground crews counted 37 bullet holes. He was one of the lucky ones. Of the 8 fighters from his squadron that engaged the B-29s that night, only 3 returned. The 47th Sentai had lost 5 fighters and 5 pilots in less than 90 minutes. They had shot down 0 B-29s. The raid itself was catastrophically effective. 334 B-29s dropped over 1,600 tons of incendiary bombs on Tokyo. The resulting firestorm killed an estimated 100,000 civilians and destroyed 16 square miles of the city. Japanese air defenses shot down 14 B-29s, but Japanese fighter squadrons lost 126 aircraft, a 9-to-1 kill ratio in favor of the Americans. The B-29's Central Fire Control System had fundamentally changed the balance of air combat. In the weeks following, Japanese commanders tried new tactics: night attacks, masked formations, even ramming attacks. Nothing worked. The B-29's fire control system was simply too advanced. Lieutenant Hiroshi's discovery on March 9, 1945, came too late to change the outcome of the war. but his experience illustrated a larger truth. World War II was decided not just by courage, but by technology and industrial capacity. The B-29 Superfortress, with its revolutionary central fire control system, represented American technological superiority in its most devastating form. And Japanese pilots like Lieutenant Hiroshi paid the price for that technological gap with their lives. This is Tales of Valor, where we explore the hidden stories of World War II. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the technology and tactics that shaped history.